It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon as the train rolled gently along the countryside, its rhythmic hum blending with the soft chatter of passengers. Tom Hanks, the beloved actor known for his humility, sat in a corner seat of the first-class cabin. Dressed casually in a simple sweater and jeans, he wore a baseball cap pulled low, hoping to enjoy the journey unnoticed. Tom had chosen this train ride as a rare moment to escape the hustle and bustle of his demanding life. He sipped on a cup of coffee, occasionally glancing out at the picturesque scenery of rolling hills and golden fields. The carriage was relatively empty, save for a few travelers scattered about. One of them caught Tom's attention, an elderly man seated across the aisle, clutching a worn leather briefcase. The man, perhaps in his late 70s, exuded a quiet dignity despite his modest appearance. His tweed jacket and scuffed shoes spoke of a simpler life, and the faraway look in his eyes hinted at memories from a different era. Tom couldn't help but feel a sense of intrigue. There was something about the man that felt familiar, almost cinematic. As the train slowed to a stop at a small-town station, the man struggled to lift his briefcase. Tom noticed immediately and stood up to help. "Here, let me get that for you," he offered, lifting the surprisingly heavy bag with ease. The elderly man looked up, his tired eyes brightening with gratitude. "Thank you, young man," he said with a warm smile. Tom chuckled. "Young man? That's a compliment I don't hear often anymore." The man's smile widened as he replied, "Well, compared to me, you're practically a kid." The interaction broke the ice, and Tom decided to sit next to the man, curiosity getting the better of him. "I'm Tom," he said, extending his hand. The man shook it firmly. "I'm George. Pleasure to meet you, Tom." As the train resumed its journey, the two began to chat. George spoke with a rich, melodious voice that hinted at a lifetime of stories. Tom listened intently as George shared snippets of his life, a retired professor who had once taught literature at a small college, a widower who still carried the memory of his late wife with him wherever he went. "She was my everything," George said, his voice tinged with both sorrow and joy. "We used to travel by train all the time. She loved how it made her feel connected to the world, like we were part of something bigger." Tom nodded, sensing the depth of George's love and loss. "It sounds like you had a beautiful life together." George smiled wistfully. "We did, but enough about me. What about you, Tom? What do you do?" Tom hesitated for a moment, debating whether to reveal his identity. "I'm in the entertainment business," he said vaguely. George's eyes twinkled. "Ah, a musician? An actor, perhaps?" Tom laughed softly. "Something like that." The conversation flowed effortlessly, and Tom found himself captivated by George's wisdom and humor. The man's stories painted vivid pictures of a life filled with adventures, struggles, and lessons learned. George shared how, as a young professor, he had once gone against the grain to defend a student wrongly accused of plagiarism. The student, now a renowned author, had sent George a signed copy of every book he published as a token of gratitude. "But it wasn't always easy," George admitted. "Standing up for what's right can be lonely." Tom was drawn in by the layers of George's experiences. "What kept you going?" George smiled faintly. "The belief that one act of kindness can ripple through time. You never know who you're inspiring." But it was when George opened his briefcase that the conversation took an unexpected turn. Inside were stacks of handwritten letters carefully preserved. "These are from my students," George explained, his voice thick with emotion. "Over the years, they've written to tell me how I've influenced their lives. I read them whenever I feel lost or uncertain about my purpose." Tom reached out gently, his fingers brushing against one of the letters. "That's incredible, George. You've made such a difference." George nodded, his eyes glistening. "It reminds me that even the smallest acts of kindness can leave a lasting impact." We never know how much we mean to someone until they tell us. The words resonated deeply with Tom. He thought about his own life, the roles he'd played, and the messages he'd tried to convey through his work. Here was a man who had lived that truth every day, touching lives in ways that were profoundly meaningful. As the train neared its final stop, Tom felt a sense of urgency. He wanted to do something for George to honor the man's legacy. "George, do you mind if I share your story?" he asked. "I think the world could use more people like you." George chuckled. "Share it however you like, Tom. If it inspires even one person, it'll be worth it." When the train arrived at the station, Tom helped George with his briefcase once more. They exchanged a heartfelt handshake, and Tom watched as George disappeared into the crowd, carrying his precious letters and a lifetime of memories. The encounter stayed with Tom long after the journey ended. That evening, he sat down and wrote about George, weaving the man's wisdom into a story that would eventually touch millions. The world soon learned about the retired professor with a briefcase full of letters, and George's simple yet profound message that kindness and connection are the true measures of a life well lived became a beacon of hope for many. But George's story didn't end there. Months after their meeting, Tom received an unexpected letter in the mail. It was from George. Inside, George shared how their encounter had inspired him to take a leap of faith he had long been avoiding. "Dear Tom," the letter began, "meeting you on that train reminded me that it's never too late to keep making a difference. After our conversation, I decided to start volunteering at the local library to teach literature to young adults. It's been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life." Tom smiled as he read the letter, feeling a warm sense of fulfillment. He decided to visit George again, this time at the library. When he arrived, he found George surrounded by a small group of students, all captivated by his storytelling. George's eyes lit up when he saw Tom. "Tom, what a surprise!" George exclaimed, standing up to greet him. Tom shook his hand warmly. "I had to see the magic in action," he said, gesturing toward the students. George laughed. "Well, it's a work in progress, but they're a great group. It feels good to be back in my element." The two spent the afternoon together, sharing stories and laughter. George shared one particularly poignant memory of his late wife. "There was a time," he said, "when we were young and broke, but we dreamed big. We wrote letters to each other every week, even when we lived in the same house. Those letters kept our dreams alive." Tom was struck by the intimacy of George's story. "Do you still have them?" he asked. George nodded. "Every single one. They're in a box in my attic. Sometimes, when the world feels too heavy, I read them and remember why I kept going." Tom felt the weight of George's words. He realized that stories like George's weren't just personal, they were universal. They reminded people of what truly mattered. That evening, Tom wrote another piece about George, this time focusing on the man's ongoing journey of making a difference. The story resonated with readers around the world, sparking a movement of kindness and mentorship. People from all walks of life began sharing their own stories of connection and impact, inspired by George's unwavering belief in the power of humanity. George's library sessions grew in popularity, attracting more students and volunteers. Tom visited often, each time leaving with a renewed sense of purpose. Their friendship became a testament to the idea that even the smallest encounters can lead to extraordinary outcomes. Years later, when George passed away peacefully in his sleep, his legacy lived on through the countless lives he had touched. Tom attended the memorial service, where former students and friends shared heartfelt stories about the man who had inspired them to be better. As Tom stood to speak, he held up one of George's letters. "George taught us that life's greatest gift is the ability to connect with others," he said, his voice steady yet emotional. "He showed us that kindness is the most profound legacy we can leave behind. Let's honor him by continuing to spread that kindness. And so, George's story became a timeless reminder that even a chance encounter on a train can change lives in ways we never imagined. Thank you for watching till the end. If you enjoyed this extended story, don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales. See you in the next one.